Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the July 21st edition of Collect Our Cousins, Engaging White People in the Struggle for Full Democracy. I'm Karen Fleshman, founder of Racy Conversations and of the Collect Our Cousins live stream series every Thursday morning at 8 a.m. Pacific. I created Collect Our Cousins to help white Americans like me become more effective in our conversations with white people in our lives, to help us build an embodied anti racist white culture. I'm featuring the people who inspire and teach me the most, like Lecia Michelle. White Americans, the battle for our democracy will not be won in courtrooms or in the streets. It must be won in white living rooms, at our neighborhood meetings, school board meetings, um, uh, in conversations with our families. As an anti racist, collecting my cousins often falls to the end of my to do list. Oh, I'll get to that next month. But I want to encourage everyone watching today to write a list of your friends and family you will collect this year. There are 21 million Americans who believe Trump is the legitimate president and political violence may be necessary to restore him. And that's why I've created this series to help us reach those folks, or we may not be able to reach those folks, but reach the undecided people in the middle and bring them along in this journey. And to that end, I'm super delighted today to have Lecia Michelle on the show. Thank you so much for joining.
I'm really excited to be here. Thank you.
Yes. Could you share a little bit about yourself and your book and all of that?
Sure. So, I am the author of the White Allies Handbook 4 Weeks to Join the Racial Justice Fight for Black Women. That book came out of just a lot of experiences I have had working with specifically white women with anti racism. In 2016, I started a Facebook anti racism group called Real Talk, Women of Color and Allies for Racial Justice and Anti Oppression. And we've been going strong for 6 years. A lot of what I learned in that group is what I put in the book. The book is what I consider a very actionable resource that you can use to really do the grassroots level work that we need to do to progress anti-racism work. So yes, read all the other books that are out there, but definitely pick mine up because anti-racism work is action. It's not just reading and listening. It is action.
Thank you so much. I find that a lot of folks want to stay in the book club phase, which
Yes.
the book club phase is extremely important, and I'm
Yes.
not toning it down. But there is the next phase, which is actually applying it
Right.
in your sphere of influence, even when it makes you really uncomfortable.
And it should make you really uncomfortable. I mean, really, can you really have a conversation with your mom or your dad or your aunt or your uncle or your sibling, and it be just this lovely talk about why they're racist? I mean, it's gonna be uncomfortable. But that's how you gauge if you really doing the work. It should be uncomfortable to you, and then also, you have to do your internal work throughout your entire journey as an ally, because it's not just pointing out to other people how they're being racist and how they're having, they're perpetuating microaggressions and what have you. You're doing the same thing. So you have to do the internal work every time so you're not falling back into that whiteness.
Yes, thank you so much for pointing that out. And I find that oftentimes when people first begin their ally journey, they're so trying to, and I did this too, right? So trying to distance themselves from the
Yes.
bad white person and
Yes.
being so vociferous about why this was so terrible. And not and meanwhile, if someone points out that they're doing something wrong, they completely spin out and
Yes.
melt down.
They take their toys and go home. Is what they do. They take their toys, they stomp out of the playground, and they go home and they probably cry. I mean,
Yeah.
it's ridiculous. Yeah, I mean, the people who I know and who I trust to do the work in the right way are the ones who will readily tell you that they still screw up 20 years after saying they're doing LA work. They're still, yes, Yes, they're still screwing up, and the thing that I need, but people who are thinking about being an ally to understand is that this work is never going to be done perfectly. Yes, you're going to screw up. Be okay with being called out, and learn from the experience. No one is going to ever not cause harm, say something racist, do something racist, but the key is, how are you learning from it? Are you listening to the people who are calling you out? And are you making some kind of course corrections to do better in the future?
100%.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Wait, Lon Dorsey, thank you for joining us. Thank you, Stephanie Irvin, for joining us. Love you, Stephanie Irvin, and love you, Dr. David Camp. When a Black person is murdered by the police, Black people protest and white folks join a book club.
I shouldn't even laugh about that,
I know,
but
it's not funny.
yeah, it is, and when I thought about writing my book, I am well aware that people are reading the really popular authors. So, White Fragility is still a really, really popular book to read. There's a list of the ones that everyone knows. People are reading them. But what I tell people who allies in progress, or allies trying to, people are really trying to be allies, yes, you have to read those books, but first of all, if you're going to pick out anti-racism books to read, please make sure that you're picking some with Black authors. Like, don't pick all the white people. I mean, yes, that those books are popular, but they cannot give you the firsthand experience that we can. So you're going to be missing out. Read all the books, go to the lectures, join the anti-racism groups. But if you're not stepping out of your comfort zone to confront and educate other white people, then your anti-journey is still basically at the remedial I'm reading stage. You're not really doing anything actionable. And that's what we need you to do.
Yes, yes. As Angela Davis talks about, it's not just theory, it's praxis.
It is. And it's really hard to get people to understand, especially if you've been reading for years. That's what you've been reading for years, and you can have all the academic discussions about how to be
bad oppression is.
Yes, and never say anything to anybody that actually needs to be called out.
Yes.
So, I think we talked about this grassroots level anti-racism work. That is how we push the needle. It's not that you voted for Obama twice and you're going to vote for him a third time if you could take office. It's not that. It's that you have made the decision that the people in your inner circle are going to be the people you focus on to address their racism. That's the work.
Stephanie says, we're conditioned to identify with our mind. Activist work requires us to also lead with our heart and spirit. Oh my God, so true, Stephanie. My mentor, Sweetwater Nanak, who's an amazing Native Alaskan healer and activist, director of Idle No More in Washington State, she talks about how white activism is so fueled by fear and anger. And she says that's why it's so ineffective. Native activism is led by the heart, by spirit. And that's how we transform people is through love.
Right. I agree with that.
David Camp says, in my coaching of white folks, I position talking about your own faults as a key to your own persuasive effectiveness.
Yes. In my book, one thing that I talk about, when you start thinking about having those conversations with someone like your parents, you really have to pay attention to that relationship. Take advantage of what you know about them, about their childhoods, about their inner circles, about the things that they're passionate about. You can be a card-carrying racist and be a teacher. You could be the most liberal voter on the planet as a white person and still be exceedingly racist. So
you could live in San Francisco, California, the most, quote, progressive city in America, be an elected official in
And
San
be
Francisco,
racist.
California.
And be racist. Yeah, I lived in Los Angeles for a really long time, and I've told people multiple times, LA is not a melting pot. I know that's a lovely saying, but LA is very segregated in a lot of ways, and LA has a lot of racism. I mean, the stories that I could tell you about my experiences being followed in stores there,
Mm.
having white women cross the street when I was like in my 20s, they would cross the street so they didn't have to walk past me. I mean, it happened all the time, so the idea that there are just pockets of racism in this country and there are places where it doesn't exist is fiction. It's everywhere. It's in the
Yes.
north, it's in the south, it's every region of this country.
But while we're mentioning LA, I do want to take a moment to celebrate the return of Bruce's Beach to the descendants of
Yes,
the family that it was stolen from,
yes,
which
there's some
occurred
progress.
yesterday.
Some
It was
progress.
a multiracial effort to do that.
And you think about how many other places that land has been stolen from Black people,
And Native people,
and Native people and Indigenous people. Yeah, um, I think that this success is very much going to be, unfortunately, an anomaly. I don't think it's going to happen very often, but I am really, really excited that it did happen and that family got some justice.
yes, me too. And how
Yeah,
transformative and healing it is for everyone.
yeah,
When there
absolutely.
truth, reconciliation, justice, then there's joy. But as
Right,
long as we're not facing the truth, as long as we're pretending there was no injustice, there's always going to be tension and fear.
right, right. We have to be honest with ourselves. We got here for a reason. It's not. We didn't just like poof happen. We are in this situation for a reason, and that reason is that this is a very white supremacist country that was founded on white supremacy, and the legacy of it still exists to this day.
Mm.
And we have to be honest about that, and we have to be honest about what steps need to be taken to address it and to fight it.
Coming back to the kind of dialogue you foster in your group and the tips you offer in the book, you said to pay attention to the relationship.
Hmm.
And do you have any other tips for white people in these conversations with white people in our lives?
Yes, absolutely. So I think one of the most powerful tools that you have is probably one that you don't think about very often, but be really upfront with all the mistakes you've made as an ally
Mm.
already and share them and share how difficult it is and share the times that you got called out and how you felt about it and how you tried, really how you addressed the feelings of defensiveness. Think about all of the ways that you've been challenged on your ally journey and try to implement those into that discussion. You don't want to come across as someone who you're automatically an ally. You've never made a mistake. You're perfect in the work. You want to tell them this is really hard. I know this is going to be a really difficult conversation for us to have. It's important that we have it. But I also want to share with you that I've had a hard time, addressing my own racism. And these are the things that I've done to do that. And I really want you to join me on this ally journey. And I want to help you address your own racism. And I want to help you be someone who is on the right side of history versus someone who's on the wrong side of history. There
I
are ways to
love
connect.
that.
There are ways to connect. I mean, it's a relationship, and it's, you need to take advantage of that relationship.
Yes. Don't come in sanctimonious. Don't come in
Right.
holier than thou,
Yeah.
and you
Yeah.
are a sinner. And
You're terrible. You're
yeah,
a terrible person. Yeah, no, you don't want to do that.
um, the author, I'm not good at pronouncing his name. Anand Srivasanan says, we need to learn from the evangelicals. Welcome, sinner. Right? I
It,
the
it
other
is it's yeah, it is something like that. Yeah, definitely.
I found myself at the start of a pro-life uh, rally and march here in San Francisco. It was so interesting how it started off. First, there was a white male priest giving a long mansplain about why this was all necessary, but then they had a series of women, uh, all different ages and races, get up and give their testimonials about how they had had an abortion and how deeply they regretted it, and how that was what fueled their activism. And I was like, God, what if like we had an anti-racist rally and people, instead of like getting up there and saying, racism is terrible, you terrible racist, people got up and said, you know what, this was what I was doing. And this was
Right.
the harm that I caused, not
Right.
only to other people, but to myself.
Mm-hmm.
And this is what I learned as I started to grow and change. And that's why I'm here. Then we could really grow this movement.
Right. That's why I try to really focus on telling people that they have to have a support system. You need an accountability group, you need some kind of a affinity group, because those are the people that are going to do exactly what you're talking about. They're going to keep you going on your ally journey. They're going to call you out when necessary. They're going to be there to answer questions that you might have about an encounter that you had that went badly. How can you do better than next time? There's no way to do this work effectively without somebody partnering with you. It's not going to happen.
Yes, this is not individual work.
No,
This
it's
is
group work. It's
collective.
the
Yes.
group work. Yes.
Stephanie says we have to celebrate and envision it happening more. Our words hold power. That's it. We're always stuck in countering what's happening, and that's so draining and exhausting.
Right.
That where is our space to carve out to envision the abundance and joy and because it's all interrelated, the environmental degradation, misogyny, all of it is interrelated to the hierarchy of racism. And when
Right.
we get rid of the hierarchy of racism, it will be good for everybody.
And I think people have a hard time understanding that, racism doesn't just, affect the recipients of it. It's definitely eroding our society. And if we eradicate it, this country's going to just look a lot different. Everything else is can be addressed in a more logical fashion, but racism permeates everything here, and it affects everything.
David says, sadly, it will probably take POCs being willing to talk about how white superiority thinking to shift white folks to accepting the fact that this thinking affects everyone. The black tax continues.
Right. He's right. He's right. And the thing that's challenging, though, about talking about white superiority is, and it's funny because I watched a video the other day, and someone probably watched. I mean, it went viral. I don't remember the black lady's name, but one thing that she said that I wish I'd put in my book, but I'll say it now. Is when you're having conversations with white people about racism and white white supremacy, we really need to ignore the white guilt thing. They're gonna try to make you feel guilty. We got to ignore the tears. We got to ignore everything that they're gonna throw at us to get us to not have that conversation. And we have to stop feeling stressed or guilty for having that conversation with them. We have to just keep pushing and talk about it, especially in those situations where no one is stepping up for us. Then if we're the voice that has to open our mouths, and we have to say, okay, I'm going to say it, I'm going to put it out there, and I'm not going to worry about their feelings.
Which is super hard to do given the fact that we are all carrying intergenerational trauma, right? Right now in our conversation, it's not just you and me who are here. It's all of our ancestors.
Right.
And what my ancestors did to your ancestors. So my ancestors are saying, do all you can, be on guard, because she is going to hold you to account for all of that.
Right.
And do all you can to silence her, minimize her,
Yeah. And then my ancestors are going to say, fight, keep fighting, open your mouth, keep pushing, and it might be even dangerous for you. It might be traumatizing for you. But that's what we have to do, but I do think the responsibility of fighting racism has to fall mainly on the shoulders of white people. The system is a system you benefit from. I don't benefit from it. It oppresses me every day. So, one of the reasons I wrote the book is because I really want to give white people the tools that they're going to need to have the conversations without them saying, hey, Lecia, can you talk to me about racism? And then you can listen to all my horrible stories of being a racist. No, I don't really want to hear your stories about how racist you were. I mean, I do listen sometimes, but that is traumatizing. It is traumatizing for a Black person to hear the ways that you have harmed us.
And what is that white person really seeking is for you to absolve
Validation.
them. Yeah,
Validation. And for me to say, oh, okay. Oh, yeah,
I
that's horrible.
understand.
Yeah, yeah. And I'm sure you're better. But that's the thing. It's like if you would even think it was okay to have that conversation with me, what does that say about you as a person? You know.
And your mindset, 100%.
Yeah, you're way more concerned about me, like you said, absolving your guilt than how traumatizing that conversation is going to be for me. You're not even thinking about that.
Which is 100% racist. As
Very
opposed
much
to,
so.
I do think it's important to have those conversations, but have it in a white affinity group
Mm-hmm.
where we can process all those. One of the things that I think is we have to make clear is feelings are legitimate. Okay, it is legitimate to feel intense shame and guilt
Right.
about being white.
Right.
Okay, but we process those feelings with other white people,
Not
and
with
we,
the Black people.
yes, and we
Not
do
with the
not,
Black people.
stay just in our white affinity space
Right.
processing those feelings.
Right. Right.
We
And
break out of that space.
right.
Genuine white guilt remorse exists too. I often feel ashamed, but I press on to a better place for personal anti racism. The amount of white tears I have cried, I mean, buckets. When you realize the intensity of the harm that you have caused, that your ancestors have caused, that literally is the foundation of the house you live in, the bed you sleep in, and everything that you've attained.
Right.
It's a lot to deal with.
I would be worried if you didn't have any feelings about it. Like, how can you not? You don't feel anything about? Okay, like that's I mean, I think that it's just logical that you're going to, once you start doing the work and understanding your place in this society and the ways that you have contributed to racism, yeah, you're going to feel remorseful and guilt. Use those emotions to be an ally. Use those emotions to teach other people to have those feelings. If they are just defensive and they're like, well, my family didn't own slaves. First of all, you don't even know because you probably haven't looked. And second of all, even if they have, that's not the conversation we're even having right now, because racism still exists. It's not like all of a sudden 1863, when the slaves were freed, it stopped. Let's pay attention to what's going on, not even just post slavery, modern day. Slavery is has definitely had a lasting impression on Black and white relationships in this country. I mean, I can't tell you how many times I have people say to me, well, my ancestors didn't own slaves, and my family's very liberal. Well, you can be liberal and be really racist. So I don't know, what the liberal thing doesn't do anything for me. It really doesn't.
Yeah, and whether your family owned slaves or not, at the time of emancipation, enslaved people's value was $3 billion. They
Yep.
were the largest
Yep.
asset class,
Yep.
bigger than railroads, buildings, everything else combined.
Right. And that's
So,
why the South was so upset, that they were, and it's not, yeah, I mean, they were getting freed, and there, yeah, the people, the property that they had, that they were, just making tons of money. And also people in the North who were not necessarily, they were making a ton of money off enslaved backs too,
yes,
So, I mean,
the
when I tell people,
factories.
yes. And when I tell people, if you think about these companies, these factories that have been around since slavery, that maybe they've evolved into other things, that money is still sitting there. How many institutions, higher ed institutions, do we have that have made money off of enslaved people? Enslaved people probably physically built those places,
Yes.
but we're just now starting to have those conversations. And I know there's a lot of shame around it, but it's legitimate history. It's legitimate history. And we have to, admit that, enslaved people literally built this country.
I grew up learning about my great grandpa and what an incredible immigrant he was. And he made his way to the Midwest and he founded the family farm. And, through his hard work and determination, created this prosperity for our family. That's the foundation. That's where my mom grew up. That's how she became a homeowner. That's how she got a college education. It's how I became a homeowner, how I got a college education. Well, then I start to research, oh, that land he got through the Homestead Act.
Oh, yeah.
And he was eligible for it because he was a white Protestant male immigrant. And that land was the traditional territory of the Cheyenne, Arapaho, and Kiowa people who a decade before they'd come through and just
Yep.
slaughtered, removed to
Mhm.
far off, reservations,
Right.
the survivors, shipped the kids to the Indian boarding
The boarding school.
schools.
Yeah.
And so while it is true that my great grandfather did come here as an immigrant, he got an asset that many Black people could have benefited from too,
Mhm.
because it was right at the time post Civil War when they were stuck sharecropping
Mhm.
and could not move.
Yep.
So it's all, and there's like 49 million Americans who are descendants of Homestead Act land grants. You think about all those senators
Oh, yeah.
confirming Kavanaugh and you know uh, impeding any kind of progress. They all represent the states that were settled through the Homestead Act.
Right. Right. I mean, historical, generational wealth is a thing. Most Black people, we don't have generational wealth, and for that very reason, we don't have the home that's been in your family for generations to pass down to our children. We're still fighting to be able to fairly get home loans. There's still an issue with that. We're still fighting, to have our properties assessed, at a fair price. I mean, so we're still fighting for things that I think white people don't really think about. The idea that we haven't worked hard enough to get what we need is discounting everything that Black people have gone through. And the fact that we don't have the assets to help our children and then have them help their children, is directly because of slavery. It has nothing to do with us not wanting to work. I mean, my God, my ancestors worked the fields. Of course, we worked really hard, for nothing. So I think this narrative that we're lazy and that we just don't work hard enough, and that if we worked a little bit harder, we'd be better off, is just complete gaslighting. Until we really kind of get right with the history of this country and how it's affected Black people, how are we even going to start having a conversation around racism and white supremacy and how that is still directly affecting my life?
100%. And that the narrative you just described is exactly the narrative I learned growing up, alongside with racism is terrible and Dr. Martin Luther King is wonderful. Well, then why is there so much racial inequality? Oh, well, we used to have terrible racism, but then there was a civil rights movement, and now opportunities are
Mhm.
distributed equally. And some families like ours work really hard. That's why we have what we have. And other families choose not to. And that's why they're in the situation that they're in. And
Exactly.
here in 2022, his is the candidate, a Asian American woman on the San Francisco school board, appointed by our Black woman mayor, campaigning for her seat because her seat was created through a recall of the past members, saying, from my very limited exposure in the past 4 months to the challenges of educating marginalized students, especially in the Black and Brown community, I see one of the biggest challenges as being the lack of family support for those students. Unstable family environments caused by housing and food insecurity, along with lack of parental encouragement to focus on learning, cause children to not be able to focus on or value learning. That makes teachers work harder because they have to take care of emotional and behavioral issues of students before they can teach them. That is not fair to the teachers.
Where does one even start with that nonsense? You know, I it's just that just breaks my heart because how unfair to those families that are working hard and sending their kids to school. Being part of a single family, a single parent home doesn't mean that you're not parenting your kids and that you're not disciplining your kids and you're not teaching them the importance of education. you know um, I would be interested to look at statistics in San Francisco as far as disciplinary actions broken down by race. Because one thing that I learned when I was writing my book, and I was actually looking at uh, the disciplinary levels and who was being disciplined,
Mm.
you would think that it would be, oh, it's probably in the South. No, it's this entire country where you look at the numbers and overwhelmingly Black children are disciplined more often for the same offenses as white children. So, the idea that she would just make this blanket statement that obviously it has to be the fault of these parents not disciplining their kids and not teaching their kids the importance of an education and not raising them properly. I mean, has she stepped into every one of those households and talked to those parents? You know, and
And
where are the white people? Where are the
where
white
are the
people?
white people? Where
Like,
are the white people
come
saying
on,
this
yeah,
is
come on, San
unacceptable?
Francisco, come on, you guys are liberal. Why are you not up in arms? This is the first I even heard about this. So why am I not hearing about this on national news? Come on, that lady, if she wins, those parents are going to suffer.
Yes.
Those parents are going to suffer because she is not going to advocate for them. She's not now, obviously. She wins the seat. She's absolutely not going to advocate for them. And, one thing that is really important when you are of a marginalized community and you're in a school system where you are a minority is the people who are making the decisions about curriculums, making decisions about policy and procedure. If they don't care about the non-white people, then you're just going to be an afterthought and you're going to feel it every day. Every day.
Every day.
You
Every
know,
day until you finally give up.
you give up or you move or you just give up and just say, okay, hopefully they'll graduate. Yeah,
It's not a dropout crisis, it's a push out crisis.
it
It's
is.
not an achievement gap, it's an opportunity divide.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
And I see it in my kids' school, right? My kids attend one of the most diverse schools in the state of California. After the Black parents got to drop their kids and zip off to work.
mm-hmm,
They have fixed start times. The white and Asian American parents can linger around, have coffee,
mm-hmm.
volunteer, do all this stuff. And then we're patting ourselves on the back saying, "Oh, well, we're the good parents because we're involved."
Yeah, yeah.
But it's like, well, of course we're the good parents because we have the time to be involved, because we have the generational wealth and the job flexibility. Maybe our spouse is working, whatever the case may be, that we have the time to do this. But if you're living paycheck to paycheck, and I'm not insinuating that all Black families are, but in our school, more than 50% of the kids are on reduced and free school lunch.
Mm-hmm.
So, and you got to start time or you're going to get fired.
Yeah, I mean, and the thing is, like, I went to a mostly white school in Southern Illinois, and I definitely had my struggles there, and I was a really good student. Um, but I had a couple of racist teachers, and I will say that, my mom worked. She worked a lot, but my God, she was, there all the time. I mean, she helped with homework, she volunteered at the school, and I think a lot of parents, a lot of Black parents, are very much involved behind the scenes. You think about if you're coming home from work, you're up helping your kids with their schoolwork. You're going to their athletic events, you're going to their plays, you're going to their musicals and things like that. So the idea that she assumes that all of the Black parents are just not doing anything is ridiculous. She also has to think about, how do those kids feel being one of the few of them in that school system? How incredibly isolating is that? And then, I guarantee you they've had problems with some of those teachers. I guarantee you they have, and it might be blatant racism. It might be, things that are going on that teacher has always behaved that way and just doesn't pay attention anymore to what she's doing. But what outlet does that child have? Do you trust going to the counselor or the principal? Probably not. They don't look like you either. So she really needs to do some research and do some reading and talk to some of these parents and talk to the teachers who really understand what's going on. The ones who are like, I know these kids are working hard. I know these parents are working hard to make sure their kids are succeeding. A lot of the challenge is outside of what those parents can do. Even within the educational system, there's systemic racism. So why is it on the shoulders of these parents to fix something like that? Why would it be the administration looking at that to make sure that those kids are in a mentally safe space for them to learn? I mean, has that discussion happened? Probably not. If she gets elected, she'll probably say they don't need that. They don't need that.
No, that's not a
Just suck it
priority.
up.
Let's focus on their test scores. Let's
Yes.
do this and that.
Yeah.
And then, oh, look, we focused on their test scores and we haven't been able to budge. So again, the fault is on them.
Yeah. But yet there are school systems that have said, you know what, the test scores are really important, but we also have to focus on the mental health of these children.
Especially now. We are in a massive youth mental health crisis.
Yeah. You think about the amount of adults that had mental breakdowns during the pandemic. Consider what the kids went through.
100%. And how some kids, with privilege had laptops and Wi-Fi and sports activities and social activities and all this stuff, attention from parents, and other kids didn't have any of that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was in part of the time I was in Georgia at a public library, and I was running a branch there, and I was really trying to pay attention to how the kids were doing during the pandemic. I mean, we had closed, but I could see questions coming through, and I could, we were still getting questions about various things. And what I came away with, not even just in the community that I was supporting, but in a lot of these majority Black school systems, is that there was not support from the administrators as far as making sure the kids had access to Wi-Fi, of all things. If you don't have you don't have stable Wi-Fi, you can't keep up with the schoolwork because everything is online, and it was online for almost 2 years. So, the idea that a lot of the white school systems already had things in place because they were already doing some version of hybrid learning. The fact that these Black school systems, these brown school systems, no one thought about that until they had to be reactive to the pandemic. And by then it was too late. You're already too late. Yes. How are you going to make sure all these kids have Wi-Fi and still are able to have access to their teachers? I heard horrible stories about teachers just not stepping up with their kids at all, and then being flexible as far as, homework and meetings and things, because even though the kids at home, one or both of the parents may not be there all the time. Maybe somebody is stepping in to watch the kids, so, the idea that we're coming out of a pandemic and, we can just push these kids back into the school system and not consider where they are mentally. And also a lot of kids fell very much behind over 2 years because everybody has the ability to learn online. It's hard for us adults to do that. A 7-year-old, an 8-year-old, like really, I mean.
And now they're coming back. They're feeling tremendous anxiety. Mm-hmm. They feel awkward. They don't know how to relate with each other. Their developmental stage and their learning stage is all mismatched from where they were age-wise and grade-wise before. Right. And so I'm running for school board against this woman. And my campaign is about, let's focus on social emotional learning, mm-hmm. creating psychological safety, building a learning community, getting the kids together and having the young people direct the learning and have the teacher more like a facilitator and doing the kinds of fun activities that's going to make them want to come back to school
Exactly.
and be there
Yeah.
together. And then
Exactly.
once you've built the container and you have the relationship and you have the compassion, then you start to focus on the academics. But if we bring them back and just bombard them,
Mm-hmm.
they're just going to be they're going to check out more.
Mm-hmm. And they're going to fail, and they're going to
Yeah.
fail.
And then
Yeah.
they're internalize that they are a failure.
Mm-hmm.
And we cannot afford that.
Right. See, you're doing one of the things that I talk about in my books. My book, as far as ways that you can be an ally. Run for a school board, run for a library board. You guys, oh my gosh, the library board is a huge one to run on. You'll be working with the school board people. Work
Yes.
for city council, run for city council, run for all these local elections so that you have a voice. And if you don't want to run, but you know that there's somebody of color, black or brown person who is running, and they have, the beliefs that you have, please campaign for them. Door
Yes.
knock, make calls, go to the meetings, do all the things to help them get elected. Because, like I said, it's the president of the United States. Yes, that is a very important, whoever we have in office. But at these local levels, it is these local elections that are going to affect specifically the children.
100%. And
Yeah.
the Republicans are so good on this. They have put their candidates in the school boards
Right.
for years.
Mm-hmm.
That's how they build their grassroots base all the way up to the Senate.
Right.
And so even though they represent a minority of Americans, they are so involved in every aspect of policy setting. And the policy setting that has the most impact on us is the local one.
Yep.
And I think, like, for
Yep.
me, I was always like, oh, I kind of want to run for office, but I don't know. No one's asking me to. No one's going to ask you
No,
to.
you have to just do it.
You have
You
to
have
just
to
say,
just do it. Yeah, and thankfully, we're in an era of social media, so you can get people who will give you great tips, help you campaign, help you put together materials that you can pass out. So I mean, the information is there. And there are organizations that actually are specifically trying to target having more minorities, more women in some of these local offices. We really have to get serious about where the real work resides, and it is in your cities and your towns.
yes.
Those are the people who are dictating day-to-day life. And if you're talking about achieving real equality, running for a school board is probably one of the best things that you can do, because then you can bring up and you can help people in that school system who don't have a voice. You can be their voice. You can be the person who's going to advocate for these kids.
Who are the least likely to come to the school board meeting, right?
Yeah.
Those
Yeah.
who are closest to the problem are closest to the solution, and often not going to go to the school board meeting because they don't feel they'll be heard,
Right.
or because they have to work, or for all these, they don't have transportation.
Mm-hmm.
They have to take care of their kids. They don't have
Mm-hmm.
anyone. So you have to go to them
And find
listen
out, what are
to
your
them.
issues? What do I need to bring up at the meeting? How can I advocate for you? How can I be your voice? If we don't have that at the local level, obviously we don't have it nearly enough. That is why we have so many problems with, even the school systems and how they're treating Black and brown students, because the school boards are not protecting these kids. So we have to infiltrate these school boards.
Yes. And when we go back to the history, we learned that universal public education was established at the same time as the post Birth of a Nation national expansion of the KKK. And the KKK, they wanted to become a legitimate political party, and their number one plank was public education and getting elected to school boards and making curriculum decisions. And then, like, United Daughters of the Confederacy,
oh my God,
getting all these horrible textbooks written and implemented. So they always, organized white supremacy has always infiltrated public education in this country.
Right.
And we have to be the ones to turn that around.
Right.
Oh my gosh, we could go on forever and ever.
I feel like we just started and it's quarter till. What happened?
Is there anything that you really want to get off your chest? Anything that keeps you up at night?
Well, what's keeping me? Well, I think the January 6th hearings are probably keeping me up at night right now. And that's not necessarily, talking, directly about anti-racism, but it all fits. It all fits because I am legitimately worried about Trump getting back into office. Um, I don't know if this country can handle another 2 years of his campaigning and 4 years in office. I don't think we have it in us. I think that the damage that he did in those 4 years, we will feel for many generations to come. I think what's also keeping me up at night is there are still people who think that their one issue is the reason to not vote or to vote. For example, a lot of people, are bringing up the school loans, which, I agree. I think that they're predatory loans. I think there's something that needs to be done about them. And actually, Biden has forgiven a lot of people's loans. So he's doing an amazing job. But if your idea of being a responsible voter is to say, if I don't get my school loans forgiven, or if I don't get this one issue from my candidate to support, I'm not going to vote, then that tells me you don't care about all the people who have less privilege than you. You don't care about the people who are still fighting just to be able to go to the polls to vote. You're people who are still fighting to get their kids into good schools. You shouldn't have to bus your kid across the city to go to a good school. It doesn't make any sense. People who are just want to go to the grocery store and not worry about getting shot. So let's put things into perspective. How many mass shootings have we had? I don't even know. In the past week, just the past week, there's been several. So yes, that one issue that you have may be important to you, but as a country, we have to pay attention to what's going on that's affecting people who are the most vulnerable. The GOP is talking about getting rid of Medicare again. My mom's on Medicare. What does that say for her if she has to have a surgery and they get rid of it? I don't think people are considering the other people in this country who are just really, one bad vote away from not having, health care, not having a house, not having a job. We are a country that for some reason, a lot of people have convinced themselves that unions are a bad thing. Unions are not a bad thing.
Unions are imperative.
They're amazing. And then there are a lot of people, I just don't believe in unions. It's like, well, if you've never worked in a job that's had a union, then you don't understand
exactly
how important they will protect you, So I guess those things keep me up at night. But I am, I'm ready to get this work done with anti-racism. I'm ready to kind of move forward with that. I am curious about the hearings and to see what's going to happen afterwards. I do think they're going to have some ramifications for us for the next several years. But overall, it's good. Everything's good. The book comes out Tuesday, so I'm super excited about that. I'll probably be drinking some champagne.
And remind us of the name again.
It is called The White Allies Handbook, 4 weeks to join the racial justice fight for Black women.
So we can go online right now and pre-order it.
Absolutely,
you can our local bookstore.
Yeah, if you have a bookstore that you love, go in there and give them the title or give them my name because I only have one book, and they'll look it up and they will pre-order it for you.
Yes. Excellent. Lecia, if you could wave a magic wand and get white people to start doing something or stop doing something, what would it be and why?
If I had a magic wand, I would get white people to start thinking outside of their own needs and their own beliefs and being open to other people's experiences without feeling the need to discount or dismiss them.
Excellent. How can we follow you and support you?
So I'm on Twitter. I have a very interesting group of people on Twitter who I have a lot of allies in my follow group. So I'm at Lecia Michelle 11 on Twitter. I'm also on LinkedIn. I know you guys are on LinkedIn. Some of you are looking at there. My real name is on there. But I do I have a lot of conversations on Twitter as far as allyship. As a matter of fact, we're doing a Twitter Spaces tonight at 7 o'clock Central. We're going to talk about allyship. So
Yes,
that's what we're going to do. I'm excited.
I posted your Twitter handle there.
Oh, thank you.
Yes. Thank you so much for joining us. This has been such a great conversation. Folks who tuned in, join us next week on July 28th, 8 a.m. Pacific. Our guest will be my elder, Paul Kivel, who's a long-term author, activist, educator, co-founder of Surge. Just an incredible, incredible guy. I'm super looking forward to my conversation with Paul. Thank you to everyone who submitted comments. I'm sorry I didn't pull up all your comments, but I'm so glad you're watching. And if you got some value out of this conversation, please do share it with someone, and definitely go buy Lecia's book. Until next week. Bye, everybody.
Thank you.